Okay, folks, welcome to my review of Isom number 3, where I'm going to show you how this book has already reached peak unacceptable. Please note that I had originally planned this video as a joint review of Isom number 3 and the Great War of Separation number 2, but as sometimes happens with books, not just Rippaverse, this happens with other publishers too, by the time I had written enough commentary to get to my main point, I had already accumulated enough material for its own video. So in my next video, I'll be looking at these two books closely together. Why? Because Isom number 3 actually has a scene that references the Great War of Separation number 2 in an editor's note. So in that future video, I'll be looking at the relationship between these two comics. In this video, however, I'm just going to cover the scene from Isom number 3 that makes the reference. So let's start that now. The scene begins with Isom's crime lord nemesis Darren Fontano being told by his henchmen that some nefarious deed is ready to be done. And Darren gives the go-ahead but says, "No casualties, we just want to bring him out." Him presumably being Isom. We then cut to an annoyingly silent panel of the Silman household. Is this Isom's house, perhaps? To know that it isn't, you'd have to have a good enough memory to remember back 2 whole years to that one panel from Isom number 2 that showed us Isom's house. And what about new readers? Forget those punks, why give them any help? We find out in the next totally silent panel that this is the house of Isom's parents, Jacob and Harriet Silman. There's about a full page of chit-chat about how their daughter Altona calls often, but their son Avery, who is the hero known as Isom, rarely calls. Then we get a full page of Jacob Silman lying back while Harriet goes inside to check on her pie, all the while being completely oblivious to the fact that his backyard is about to be invaded by Darren Fontano's henchmen. By the way, I was not kidding either time I said there's a full page of this. I spared you the last full page of drivel, but I'm showing you this one as proof I'm not lying. In this case, we actually get 2 full pages of this. So please, do not take the fact that Isom number 3 is a whopping 144 pages to mean that Eric July is a prolific writer who delivered maximum content in this comic book. This book is more padded than Dylan Mulvaney's bra. In fact, I normally wouldn't show you this whole fight scene in full, but I think it's important you know just how worthless these pages are. This is complete fluff. This is what you write when you don't have anything interesting to write. Takes 2 panels to throw this punch, for fuck's sake. This whole fight sequence should have been a page and a half tops. The scene with Isom's mom doesn't go any faster either. It takes her 2 panels to open this oven door with a bang. Oh, wait, no, that bang didn't come from the oven door. It came from Darren's goons breaking in the front door. This is just another example of bad sound effect placement like the scratching I covered in my Isom number 3 review called Fill in the Blanks, where, not having yet read the lower 2 panels, we could easily think the scratching is coming from Bloodruth's pen, but in fact it's coming from this door. So Darren's goons invade the house, and despite Darren's call for no casualties, poor Mrs. Silman is about to get her head bashed in with a chair, and she screams appropriately. But like before, this shouldn't take a whole page to do. Just eliminate this panel and move its dialogue balloon to the next panel, same as you could eliminate this panel and move its dialogue balloon to the previous panel. In fact, taking out these 2 panels would have freed up enough real estate to move the entire contents of this 3rd page into the lower half of the 2nd page. Then you'd have a whole other page free to, I don't know, maybe tell an actual story. Because let's face it, this 3rd page is an absolute waste. Unless Isom's mother flat out dies or suffers a catastrophic injury from this blow, there's no reason to play it up like this. Especially since the warning Darren gave at the beginning of the sequence has essentially prevented us from believing there will be any serious or lasting consequences. In fact, I haven't seen a comic book diffused of tension so badly since 2014's A Voice in the Dark number 4 that actually trigger warned me about an attempted sexual assault. Great! Not only did you spoil that a sexual assault was coming, you told me it doesn't actually happen. Way to go! That's not killing the excitement or anything. Same thing goes for this. You want me to think Isom's mom is in any real danger when the shock collar requested his men play softball? You don't get to have it both ways. And do you even understand how much Darren's insisting they hold back makes him look like a pussy? This is just like when Santuan defied him and all Darren did was fire Santuan and threaten him with a bad Yelp review. Darren is the lamest gangster ever. So this full-page splash panel, despite looking kind of cool, lacks any real power to impress because we've been forewarned not to worry about the parents suffering any real damage. And what's really sad is that we're using up a whole page here when there's a panel right around the corner that's actually worth spending an entire page on. That's the panel where Mama Silman gets up and shows us that it's through her that Isom inherited his powers. Imagine having this be a full-page spread of Mama Silman showing us she's a badass except bitch. In real life, however, that panel is shrunk down, shoved to the side, and buried in slow pacing and bullshit dialogue. Never mind that this, sorry about that, leads into the mom's monologue without any thought of a proper segue, but I dare you to try reading all this wannabe badass dialogue without cringing so hard inside your guts burst. You dared to step into our home, our place of solace. By the way, do you even know what solace means? It means the comfort you receive after something traumatic has happened. What happened to the Silmans that they need solace? Is this supposed to be a teaser of some kind to some traumatic incident in the Silmans' past, or did Eric just use a word he heard a few times that he thought meant rest and actually meant something else? I strongly suspect it was the latter. Anyway, let's start over. You dared to step into our home, our place of solace, and though you will be unsuccessful, you're attempting to rob me of it all. The world is already cruel enough. A person should at least find peace in their own home. How many families have you torn apart by taking that from them? And yet, you threaten me, in my own home, without hesitation. This isn't the first time you've done this. May the Lord have on you what I cannot promise. Mercy. You just know Eric July thought he was writing some Tarantino-level dialogue here. This is not that. This is nowhere near that. I actually empathize with this henchman right here. All right, that's enough. Shut this woman up. Also, can we just step back for a moment and admire how incompetently the lettering team of Invisible Art Studio did their job here? I'm usually on their side because of the unfairly minimalist font style of billing they get on Rippaverse credits pages. Their mention should be of equal size with the artist and colorist at least. But here it's difficult to see how they could have fucked up this dialogue separation and placement any harder. This sentence belongs at the end of the previous balloon. This dialogue balloon belongs in the previous panel, and this dialogue balloon also belongs in the previous panel. This is all just goddamn obvious. I mean, Invisible Art Studio does do a basic job of lettering. Words do appear in the comics. But at some point, Rippaverse has to realize you only get what you pay for, and if you can't pay enough on the lettering side, then you at least need editors capable of pushing back on your letterers and saying, no, you need to do this right. But Rippaverse doesn't have that kind of editorial talent, and at this rate probably never will. The next couple of pages are filled with pretty tepid and mostly silent fight choreography, punctuated by weird fight sound effects like slap and tap, and culminating with Darren's henchmen being quickly and summarily disposed of. This indoor fight scene concludes with Jacob finally coming to Harriet's rescue after having fought off Darren's 3 goons in the backyard, which is pretty damn miraculous considering the state in which we left that fight. I'd love to know just how Jacob got himself out of this predicament, but it's never explained. I'm not going to get deep into the Great War of Separation number 2 right now, but I am very strongly reminded of the scene on page 12 of that issue where the U.S. government's accepts, who looked like they were going to hand the Texas National Guard their asses, were summarily caught and shackled without any explanation of how the Texas soldiers turned the tide against them. One minute these accepts were kicking ass, and the next minute they're hogtied and on their way to jail. If you want any more evidence that Chuck Dixon was hewing closely to Eric July's notes for the first 12 pages of the Great War of Separation number 2, look no further than this similar "and then a miracle occurred" ending to that book's initial fight. Before moving on, let's take one more moment to note how the dialogue concerning the safe room and shotgun here should have been moved into a dialogue balloon of its own in the next panel. Better yet, split the dialogue and have Harriet say she's going for the shotgun. Having both characters exhibit a sense of preparedness will make the couple more interesting. Now, before we can continue with Isom's parents' portion of the story, we need to do a quick catch-up with Isom himself. When last we left him, Isom had realized there was something wrong with his powers. Soon, he's too weak to even stand. Fortunately, one of Bloodruth's ghost dogs comes to fetch him and carry him away from danger. The ghost dog takes him directly to Bloodruth, who's actually surprised to see him because I honestly don't think she sent the dog after him. I think it was entirely the dog's idea, and apparently so does Isom because he doesn't thank Bloodruth one bit. So even though she left him in the lurch to probably die, he confides in her his sudden weakness. For the first time in 3 issues, we get some information as to where Isom's powers come from. He asks Bloodruth if she's ever heard of Heekers, and she reacts like he just told her he was born with 2 dicks. That's where this scene ends, though. So we don't get any more revelations until after Isom finds out about the attack on his parents, and he goes to check on them to see how much damage he's responsible for, knowing that it's his actions against Darren Fontano that caused this blowback incident. All it takes is one hug to let Mama Silman know her son's strength isn't what it should be. She directs him to sit down so they can talk. Now, if you remember the last time Avery Silman sat down and had a heart-to-heart talk with someone about superheroing, you already know this heart-to-heart between Avery and his mom is going to be a dog's breakfast of the most unclear string of non-sequiturs you've ever heard. First, Harriet asks Avery about Jasmine Newman, the missing girl his sister Altona asked him to find. Harriet and Jasmine's mother were friends, and Avery only said yes to the chore of finding Jasmine so as not to upset his mother. The best Avery can say is that he thinks Jasmine's good because although he did find her in Isom number 1, he was interrupted by Darren's goons before he could find out what her real situation was. Which makes this next thing said by Harriet make no goddamn sense. You did the right thing for the wrong reasons. That's not the problem being described here. The problem is that Avery left the right thing incomplete. He didn't find out why Jasmine had gone missing or whether she was actually okay. Even after taking care of Darren's goons, instead of going back after Jasmine and figuring out exactly what was up, Avery instead busted up Darren's club, which is what brought Darren's retaliation down on Avery's family. So Avery didn't do the right thing for the wrong reasons, he forsook the right thing to do the wrong thing. The next two panels don't logically follow either. First, we get a partial info dump about how peakers like Harriet and Avery are somehow unique among excepts because they have to earn their abilities. This editor's note seems to indicate that Avery earned his abilities during the Great War of Separation when he was still a child. We'll come back to this in a little bit. Harriet theorizes that the reason Avery is losing his powers is because he isn't using them with proper intent. So long as he was either using his powers to be a hero or not using his powers at all, as during his period of self-imposed retirement, he retained his abilities. But his recent bout of using his powers for the wrong reason has resulted in his beginning to lose them. Avery protests, saying that he's back in the hero game and that he even used his powers recently to save his ranch administrator Sam from being kidnapped. But Harriet counters that because he only resumed his hero identity in the first place to put Darren down, none of his recent heroics count. Note that the back and forth here is terrible. It looks like Harriet's asking, but why did you save Sam? And Avery's replying, to take care of Darren, which makes no sense at all. Even worse, how does this intervening fact not counter Harriet's argument? Avery started losing his powers after he saved Sam. In fact, in order to save Sam, Avery had to consciously abandon his vendetta against Darren temporarily and resolve to play the hero again. You would think that his powers should have been charged up better than ever after such a change of course instead of sputtering on him so badly he had to be carried to safety by a dog, though I realize there's a lot of that going around. So on the surface it makes no sense based on Avery's recent heroics that his powers faded when they did. However, take another look at how Avery refers to his saving Sam. Took a pit stop. In other words, while he did go out of his way to save Sam, the point is that it was out of his way, his actual way being on the way to curb stomp Darren. So we can safely say that from the moment Avery decided he was going after Darren rather than looking out for Jasmine, he was on the wrong path and had been staying on the wrong path even during the side quest of saving Sam. According to this theory, Avery wouldn't have lost his powers right away just for deciding to walk the wrong path. Instead, his decision cut him off from the source of his power, which still left him with whatever charge of power he had obtained up to that point. A charge of power that would be depleted in the fight to save Sam from the cave demons who had kidnapped him. Once this charge was depleted, however, he'd have no more power left and no way to access any more, which is why he had to be saved from those same cave demons soon afterward. He was out of gas and had no way to fill up. Surprising support for this theory comes from the unexpected explanation Harriet gives for where her and Avery's powers come from. Apparently, way back in antiquity, Jesus Christ himself healed an ancestor of theirs of some malady, and ever since then, in every generation there is a chosen one. And it looks like between Avery and his sister Altona, Avery is the chosen one for his generation. But the powers of a chosen one come with a catch that is explained by Harriet in the most obtuse fashion possible. One person in each generation is blessed, but it requires absolute stasis. So there's a rarity, plus a set of circumstances. What the fuck does this even mean? What requires absolute stasis? The generation? Does there have to be peace in that generation before a peaker can manifest powers? It sure sounds like it because this manifestation apparently takes rarity, meaning there's only one peaker per generation, and a set of circumstances, meaning the status quo of society can't be in flux at the time. But if Avery initially manifested his powers, or peaked as his mother put it, during the Great War of Separation, as this editor's note implies, that period of time would be more aptly categorized as the exact opposite of stasis. War is not stasis. War is a lot of things, but it's definitely not stasis. In fact, society is rarely ever in stasis, so it makes sense that Avery calls stasis hard to achieve. Political stasis almost never happens, so how the hell is a peaker ever supposed to manifest or retain his powers if it requires the world be in stasis? But Harriet indicates in her next sentence that the stasis she's talking about isn't societal stasis, but rather the stasis of the heart. So long as you have absolute stasis inside yourself, meaning that your heart is in the right place, you'll have access to the source of your powers. Basically, Eric July is tying Harriet and Avery's powers to Christian spirituality. Jesus Christ himself is the source of their powers, and so long as they're on the right path, their connection with Jesus is strong and their powers are strong. But since in his heart Avery's been walking the wrong path lately, his tie to Christ, and therefore to his powers, is tenuous at best. Holy shit, no wonder every issue of Isom has to declare there's no connection between it and the International School of Ministry. There's actual bastardized Christian teaching going on in Isom, even if the dialogue is so horseshit that it's almost impossible to tease out. Fortunately, I happen to be pretty well versed in religion. Check out my playlist, Don't Take This as Gospel. If you'd like to find out a few things about religion you should definitely take with a grain of salt, if not an entire salt lick. Finally, Harriet concludes her sermon with what might be the most fuck-stupid thing I've heard yet. Honey, you peaked, but you haven't reached your full potential. Bitch, that's literally what peaked means. You do not reach the peak of something and still have any potential to go higher. It might be that you can go from lower peaks to higher peaks, but the point is that every time you peak, you hit a wall, and you can't go any higher from there. Peaked is not the word you're looking for here. And I don't know what the actual word you should have used is, but you needed to look harder for that word until you found it, not gone with the word that means the exact goddamn opposite of what you mean. And that's what's truly disgusting about this scene from Isom number 3. Not only is the writing atrocious in its own rights that it does everything except plainly say where Isom's powers come from and how they work, but it actually goes out of its way to redefine words to fit its stupid language. And I happen to believe that mangling the treasure of the English language to fit your trash-ass dialogue is peak unacceptable. Thank you for watching. If you found the information in this video helpful, please hit like and then subscribe to be notified of my future videos, including the next one, which will cover the link between Isom number 3 and the Great War of Separation number 2. I'll be showing you a scene from the Great War of Separation number 2 that I didn't cover in my previous review videos on that book, so be sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss out. Also, please be aware that I'm currently raising funds to answer Empress Miki Ariyama's challenge on X to review Mandy Summers' Superdead 1 and 2. We're down to $30 needed for me to purchase Superdead 1 and 2 to review and either affirm or disprove Empress Miki's assertion that these books are, in her words, not good. We'll see about that, if there's enough viewer interest. I'm Mike Bartica. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you later.